Good morning, everyone. Welcome to VMN Business Talk. Today, we're diving into a topic that's essential for every business: content. Whether you're building your brand, attracting new customers, or growing your influence, the way you create and share content can be very important for your business. If you'd like to catch up on our past episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and of course, YouTube. We truly appreciate your follows, comments, and likes. So thank you for that. My name is Diana Spinka. I'm the producer of the show. And as always, I'm here with our host, networking and marketing expert, Victor Nichols. Hello, Victor. And we're thrilled to welcome today's guest, Matt McQueeny, a digital marketing professional and business development leader with a unique approach to content that he calls Earnfluencing. Matt, good morning. Please tell us a little bit about your background and how you came up with this concept of Earnfluencing.
Of course. Good morning, Diana and Vic.
Hey, brother.
And it's only for Vic that I'll get up and do something like this at 9 a.m. But to the world, it doesn't matter, right? Everything's on demand. But if anybody, for all those watching right now, and I've heard some stories about classes and such, definitely chime in and let's make this a very active and engaging event and give a little bit of FOMO to those who watch it on demand. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. The long and short of the story is about a year and a half ago, I was tapped by one of my good friends now in the digital experience industry, and he should be on this show actually. He's a great global networking person named Giannis Boy, and he has an event called he has a group called the Boy and Company, right? That's his last name. It's been going about 20 years. And one of the groups is the CMS Experts Group. Industry I'm in, CMS stands for Content Management System. It's essentially the platform we all build our websites on, and it can go from the low end of WordPress, Wix, all the way to the upper scale of $1 million licenses, right, for certain systems. But essentially it allows you to write content in an easy way and then publish it to the web. And he asked me to do a keynote at his kickoff event last January. And I'm kind of all around, like I'm a business development, I'm sales, I'm marketing, I'm content creation. And so I didn't really know in this group what to present on. And I didn't just want to do something that wasn't going to be inspiring to me.
Right.
And so I thought for about a week, and I came up with this term, Earnfluencing. I said, you know what? Let me create a word and see what happens, and let me present on it. And so I came up with this word. I passed it by him. He said, oh, I don't know if this is going to fully work. I said, trust me, it'll work. And then I just started to build up this model around this word, and it's now kind of become a bit of an operating principle for how I do business and communicate. And what it comes down to is the mix of two words: earned media plus influencing. Anybody watching today absolutely knows what an influencer does, right? Let's think about the Kardashians at a high end, right down to micro niches. There's influencers for all different steps of life, industries, small groups, big groups. But I like the idea of taking that word because there's something that's not amazingly professional, I think, about it at times, because we think of it as a consumer marketing thing where someone's got their own YouTube. Now, they're bigger in revenue than many companies sometimes, but I go back to my history, which is journalism. And I love the word earned media. A lot of folks today might not know the word earned media because the marketplace has shifted.
Yep.
Earned media was especially created in a world where we had television news, right? And just regular television and newspapers.
Yeah, we old timers, we remember, Matt.
Yeah, exactly right. And so we look today and you say, what is earned media even, right? Because we have so many online platforms, all this. But it came down to, in that day, it was so important. And Vic, you remember these times where there would be public relations, those were the folks who would be hired by a large brand
Yep.
to get their story, their name attached to stories in the New York Times, the Wall
They
Street Journal.
specialized in that. They didn't even
Yes.
do anything else other than that.
That's right. Or television, like CNN, NBC. And when there was a world of really such large entities that controlled the message, that was a great business. But what's happened as media has democratized, starting with things like blogs, moving on to things like podcasts, moving on to things like YouTube, we look at a world where, yes, TV is still important, but in its own way. Newspapers are kind of still important, but now they're really battling with the online places that can get more views and engagement through certain methods that potentially a newspaper or a high-level news program can't, because you need sources and verification, and which is great. That is still an important part of earned media. But with this convergence, when you look at influencing and how you go about doing that, and then where earned media has come, I think there's a phenomenal opportunity in this democratization where everybody can be an influencer. And so what does that come down to? It means being both the pitch, like we just talked about, that idea of network news, newspapers, where a PR person would pitch a story. They try to model it and create a world where the writer on the other end who was going to write about this thing can't not accept this story. They got to get it in there. So that pitch was important, and there was a lot of work that went into that pitch. There's someone on here who I want to call out, I think, that's watching this, named Adam Devoren, a great earned media pro, and this was what he did all the time, and he's one of the best at it. But all those pitches, maybe like in baseball, you hit 300, you hit 30% of them. But what about the 70% of all that work that went into the pitch that didn't get there? So when you combine this with influencing and the ability to create your own platforms, you can create your own television show on YouTube. You can create your own radio show on podcasts. You can create your own newspaper on blogs, right? And websites. And when you look at all the importance of the platforms like social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, now LinkedIn increasingly, you can be both the pitch and the platform. You can be the pitch man or pitch woman and the conduit to tell everybody's stories. And when you bring on, like in this case here, when you bring me on, this is earned media for me because it is your platform. And so it creates this virtuous circle where you're always out there. You're always talking, you're creating conversations. And one of the great things with video is, I know we prepared a little, we had some chats, but there's the serendipity of conversation and a little guidance that you then create 45 minutes an hour, and that worked for the people watching it. But now the ability to repurpose, to cut it up into clips, to put it out to different audiences, to be an influencer on various topics.
Later on too, right? So you can then, retread it, several weeks later or a month later or whatever, right?
That's exactly right. And there's just never been as great a time, especially for an audience like this of business owners and business leaders. When I go back to that first keynote that I did last year at that Boy & Company event, Giannis Boy said to me, very academic, very smart. He said, "What is the problem statement?" And I said, I don't know what the problem statement is, but I'll come up with it when I get in front of the group. And then it occurred to me, are we going to be bleeped if we say a little curse here? But
no.
I said, I looked out across this audience of about 100, I'm talking founders, CEOs across this industry. And I said, Giannis wanted me to come up with a problem statement. All I can come up with is, all of you are leaving a shitload of engagement and impressions on the table by not putting yourself out there every day. You already have all that currency. Use it.
Okay, so what are the 3 ways to use it? Like the easiest ones, for people who are not Gary Vee, who are not on everywhere on social media, regular people who just want to be consistent with it.
Honestly, I think the biggest way, and we shared this in the commentary, is this term I created, contentize your experiences. What you run into when you do a lot of things in communication and social media and even influencing is you run into the, wait, you got all this engagement, you got all this. Where's the ROI? How do we monetize this? And that's extremely important. But this whole thing is one long funnel, right? I would consider these activities to be what are called tofu or top of funnel. Top of funnel is an important place. You're creating an awareness on a market in this tactic at no paid cost. It's just the cost of coming up with the idea and putting it out on the marketplace and then getting people to engage with it and the currency of attention. But everyone always says, how do you monetize? And so I say, yes, we always want to worry about monetization. But how many times do you see content out there where somebody belabored over the creation of the most amazing white paper you've ever seen? They spent months creating it, and then they put out a post, and it's like a forest. It's like the tree fell in the forest, and no one saw it. And it uses stock imagery to go along with it, and it has an amazing amount of content in it. And they spent so much time, and then you look at it, and they're like, that poor piece of content has 6 engagements on it. And then you'll always hear, well, it hit our ICP, our ideal customer profile. And it's like, yes, I get it. But let's go top of funnel. Let's get as many people into our world and ecosystem as we can. And then let's slice and dice it from there. Let's go down the funnel. So that's a long way of saying I came up with this word contentize almost as a reaction to the amount of time you hear monetize. Monetize is extremely important, but contentize your experiences. As a business leader, as a CEO, as a founder, as a C-suite, as honestly right down to starting out your career, you have an audience. You are an influencer of sorts. And even if you're new in an industry, that's its own point of view. It's kind of the fish out of water thing, right? You tell the story of an industry from the point of view of a newbie. You want the industry to explain themselves to you that you're not the initiated because you want to get more people into the ecosystem, right?
It's really what you're talking about is the currency of content.
That's exactly right. And
right? I mean, the content
exactly.
is the currency. That's where the monetization is going to come from. But you've got to make sure that you are right. That's the message, that you really got to get out there and create that content in order to start to build that critical mass, right? And touch points.
Exactly right. And there's that, you always hear that term. So I talk top of funnel, you'll hear pipeline too, right?
Right.
So pipeline is
sales, right? You always hear that in sales, right?
You always hear that. And I think pipeline and funnel, they're two, a funnel's just a pipe that's lining its way towards the close of a business. These activities, these are influencing activities. So contentize your experience. When you go to any event, when you go to any get together, honestly, if you could think of something that connects to taking your kids and dropping them off at the bus, as I just did on this before this webinar, own the feed, right? It's so easy to. And if you use simple things like images, and it might sound vain, it's not vain. It's put yourself in the images. If you're on LinkedIn, people follow you because it's you. So make sure you're in the images, not for your vanity, but you'll get more likes. They'll always say, you'll always hear the naysayers go, the LinkedIn algorithm has changed irrevocably. It's not going to follow the things
right?
you're doing. They always do that. And then they say, we need more, we need more lessons and content and all this. And I always like to joke, the picture of powerful people and known people with a good backdrop, smiling with their arms around each other, it's undefeated. No algorithm ever beats that. And I'm not saying only do that. Use that. It's a scroll stopper. People engage with it. You've tagged in the people, you've tagged in their companies. They will engage with it. Then when they engage with it, the algorithm then goes, well, shoot. All right. So they're engaging with it. So it's got to go to their network. Then what you do though, you use that to get people to stop, but then you put in a message with it, whether it's in a comment or whether it's a call to action in the post, because you've now created such top of funnel awareness. And even if a percentage of that awareness leads to a click, Vic, you're a lot in the sales stuff. The percentages of pipeline to close can be a couple of percent, right? Or it could be 10 or 15. I mean,
Absolutely. No doubt.
right? So I think of awareness that way. And if you just did the call to action, you're not going to get a great bump.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're trying to shoot a fish in a barrel. Like you're like, here's my one ICP. Let's hope it gets to them right time of day. But contentize everything. Make sure you bring in others. Like this is one of my favorite books I would recommend is called Never Eat Alone. And it's an old, and he just came at, what's his name? We'll have to look. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but I started following him in the last year as well as LinkedIn. He created a new one called Never Lead Alone, I think is what it said. But the one thing he says is when you go to a conference, or an event, be so intentional about what you are trying to get out of that event. Don't just drop in and think, I'm going to go to this event. I'm going to listen. Maybe I'll talk to a couple people here or there at the happy hour. And then I'm going to go home and then I'm going to report back that I had 5 new conversations. I did this. No, you go to that event. You do research on everybody who's going to be there. You know their story. You know who you're going to go talk to. And then you're going to try to use the talking to them to up level to say, hey, I'm such a fan. Can I take a picture with you? And then go, oh, hey, this person also. Let's get 3 of them. Take a picture with them. So now you're in their network. You're flattering them. And you're telling a story that you were there, you were present. People at conferences never have proof when they're back to the home office that they were present. I like to be the person that says, hey, this person was here. And then you get a lot of engagement on that, right?
And here's the proof, right?
Exactly right. And I think that's so contentize. Another lesson is be a beat writer for your industry. My background was in coming out of college. I got into blogging about the New Jersey Nets for NJ.com. I learned so much about content delivery at that time. It was a period of time of that old media we talked about before, where you had television news, you had newspapers, and they were preeminent. Those beat writers were the ones who followed the team and would get into the Star Ledger, the New York Times, and they would just...
I remember it well. And then you even followed those particular writers because they were on that particular beat.
That's exactly right. And you'd have the New York Post, the New York Daily News. And I got this chance, early 20s, where NJ.com in the early days of blogging and online put out a post, hey, we're looking for fan bloggers. $50 a month, which I didn't care about, right? And I might have been the only person who applied for the Nets at that point in New Jersey. But I applied. I won the post, making a joke there. And then they said, okay, here's the keys to NJ.com's sports section. Here's how you blog. Go for it. I had no editor. And so I pumped NJ.com 8 to 12 times a day with content. I became the main content person because I was at home. I didn't have a full-time job. I was just out of college. And the beat writers, who were the influential ones, were writing 2 stories a day, sending a Word document into an editor. An editor went through it, went back with them, verified, did this, and then they had a content publisher publish it. And I'm just in there I'm direct into the vein posting. And over 2 years, I had thousands of articles I wrote directly to NJ.com. I parlayed that into being the actual beat writer within the New Jersey Nets at their website. In the early days when they would allow 220-something people, another shout out to good friend Adam Olson, they allowed 220-something people to run a professional sports team's website. And all I did, now I got paid a whole lot more, but now all I did was the same thing I did for NJ.com, except on the Nets website. Right. And I had access to the team, travel, on the floor, in practice, in the locker room. And so I learned about beat writing. And beat writing, Vic, what's a beat writer?
A beat writer is the one who focuses in on a particular vertical and actually becomes really the expert in that vertical.
That's
and
exactly.
Those people, then you build trust with your audience. They then are looking to you for guidance and information and true information and all of those pieces. That's what really builds that trust. And then you get people who are actually not only trust you, but are actually looking for your opinion and looking for what it is that you're writing about.
Exactly.
Like an influencer these days.
It kind of is, except
Yeah.
except you're also an influencer in a lot of ways does product placement, right? And they might do the beat writer is on the ground, and like you said there, Vic, a beat can be City Hall, it can be the president, it can be Congress, it could be the New York Knicks, it could be the NBA, it could be, but it's the thing you're going to focus on, and you are going to, it could be war, right? You're going to embed, that's the word you hear a lot with the war journalists, but you're going to embed in that world, and the currency becomes content and information. And everybody who needs a story to tell, which is everybody in the world, comes through you as the way station because they want influence. They want you to write about them in the platform. They also want to tell you things and then learn things. So there's a little bit of a black market to beat writing, where the thing I learned working at the Nets, 80% of the things that are actually happening don't get written about. And it's the curation of the beat writers, especially I was jokingly called the house organ, because when you work within the team, you can't say anything. You have to sign NDAs. So the 20% you can say is highly appreciated and highly curated because it's almost PR, right? You're telling a really good story and making a case. And I always joked because the beat writers would always, the true beat writers who could be unfettered and say whatever, they would always go, oh, well, you can't report on this. And I'm like, I don't want to report on the terrible stuff when there's infighting and people are going to be traded. Good for you for having that. That's
your problem, right?
I want good stories, and it's something I look back in the day when you had like the Sports Illustrated, when that was the most amazing, preeminent platform or of its time in the magazine world. It was no different for the Sports Illustrated writer. So what would happen is, they got to write the beautiful article on the champion every year. They got to embed and tell stories and do this. So I love positivity, not because I don't really want to work with entities that have too much that are trying to finagle and do dark things and nefarious things. And then you got to hide it. I'd rather be with the people to tell good stories and then tell good stories. So coming back to be a beat writer for your niche and your industry. All the value will come back to you. So right now my industry particularly is called DXP and CMS. We talked about content management system, digital experience platform is the other one. It's just another word for systems on the web that allow you to post content to websites, images, do some marketing, SEO. It's a one-stop shop for that. There are so many stories to tell across this industry. There's the main players, there's the upstarts, and so all I did was, once I learned what beat writing was in that time of covering it, I've just extended beat writing into my job wherever I go. And so now my job is not to create content for the industry, but if I'm good at that, if the platforms, there's no barrier to entry to any of these platforms. When you talk LinkedIn, YouTube, podcasts, all this, I have the experience in that I don't need any help to get those things to market. I know how to stage things. I know the selfies to take. So I just by gentle force, created myself as a point of contact for the industry. And then what happens is executives come to you and they tell you everything. And then you don't say 80% of the things they told you, but you tell the 20%. Right. But then you talk to the next executive from a competitor from this. You are the place of knowledge for an entire industry. It's so simple to get there. You just need to be trustworthy. People need to understand when they're talking to you that you're not going to spill their beans or air dirty laundry. You're a little bit of a therapist, right?
We've all experienced that, sure.
And you need to create value. So what you're doing here with the webinar, for instance, this is creating value both for your guests and your audience. And you've now had 1 hour where we all spent time and created a product that's going to go to the market, that's on the market already. If you continue to do that, if you take what you're great at and then match that with trust, relationships, clout that you might have, and tell stories, that pipeline, that top of funnel will keep you. One of my favorite sayings, others might have come up with it, but I'm going to say I came up with it, is top of the two things I like to be are top of feed and top of mind. Mm-hmm. So top of mind comes down to the things you do in the 80% that aren't public. Continually checking in on people from your network and your career. There's a guy people should follow. His name is Paul Abdul out of Toronto. He's a great relationships and partnerships guy. And he's coming out with a book actually about how to do all this stuff. I don't know it yet, but it's ABDOOL. He's also involved in the Boying Company. And he once told me that he has a spot on his calendar every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Check in with someone you haven't talked to in 2 years. And he's gotten 2 jobs on that, right? And you're not looking to do it for that.
No, but you're not looking to do it for that. And I say, Matt, you are so spot on with that, because I know in my own career that, people will say to me, Vic, oh, come to this event, do this. And I said, look, I got to be perfectly honest with you. And I want to say this in a way that people really understand it. I've been in business since 1981. There are a lot of people I know who I guarantee you will be able to interact with me, potentially bring me business and all of those things, right? That I haven't spoken to in a long time. So I'm not really looking for new people. What I'm really focusing on are the people I already know that I have neglected through the years. Okay. Now, obviously, not everybody's in that position because there are different parts in your evolution, right? But at this stage of my life and in my career, I don't really need to meet new people. What I need to do is to really pay homage to and reach back to the people that I already know, because I already know they can do things for me because they have. I haven't done that. Just what you're saying, if you haven't spoken to them in a year or 2 years, you know what? Pick up the freaking phone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also pick up the phone with the intention to do something for them, to grant them
Absolutely.
a wish, to break through a challenge they're having. Because if you're super connected across industries, there's a good chance you're going to be able to help them without an enormous lift on your part. And
absolutely,
it's like a bank, a relationship bank. The more you go out and do things for others, and it can be connecting them with an opportunity, or it can be in this Earnfluencing realm. By me being on this, you're giving something to me. This is
something personal. Yeah,
exactly. And if you create these platforms, so podcasting, for instance, was the thing I go back the longest in doing, about 12 years now. I did it because I was really interested at the time in this medium. I had a background with music and recording music, and I saw this as something a very low barrier to entry. And it was at a time before we had the StreamYards, and you actually had to, I have a whole studio, Vic's been there, in my basement where I record to tape. I got to do production. I got to post it. You don't have to do that as much anymore, but I actually loved that part of it, and it wasn't that hard for me to do because of that low barrier of entry. So within 4 weeks of having the idea to do it, I had podcasts live. And so over that time, I've recorded almost 500 podcasts. When I went to one company I work with now called Konabos, we were able to bring a podcast to that. In a normal world, they would be stopped from doing it because you'd have to get a consultant. You'd have to talk about what's our theme, what's our this, how do we get guests, how do we post, what are the platforms, and they would just be analysis paralysis. They wouldn't even think about it, right? Because it's too much. Use the things you're really good at with a low barrier of entry and just keep scaling it. And so with that podcast, which is called the Konaverse, I think our next episode is going to be the 150th episode released. Wow. And that's the power of just take what you're good at and try to release something every week, because at the end of a year, that's 52 new pieces of content. If you do 2, it's 104. It scales. It's like interest, right? It's good interest, and it scales. And then with each podcast, use it as an opportunity, or videocast like this, use it as an opportunity to connect with those you want to connect with, because you're giving them something up front. You're flattering them. You're saying, please come on and tell us your story, and we'll guide it, and we'll have this moment in time for an hour where We were together. We created this product. You tag them in. They're important. Find something in that podcast. And one thing in podcasts in general, I really believe in. I learned this from Mark Maron, who's a very famous podcaster in the entertainment realm. Just talk to people about their life, because we get so caught up in, all right, transaction over transformation. What today is going to get me a piece of business? But if you treat every day that way, you end up nowhere. So if you talk to them, hey, what does your product and solution do today? What do you want it to do tomorrow? It's not going to stand out. Stories stand out. Mm-hmm. People stand out. And so I've kind of fallen into this model of any time a new guest comes on to a property of mine, it's like when a new person comes or a new character comes into a TV show. There's always the backstory, and then we move forward with them. So I help tell the story of that guest who's come in and granted me the opportunity to talk to them. But you know what the interesting thing is? They always leave going, oh my gosh, I hadn't talked about that or thought about that in 20 years. So it ends up being this cathartic therapy that they appreciate, and it makes them think about things in a new way today. And then, by the way, when it goes out there, they're the greatest ambassador of the episode because they felt a personal connection with it because you asked them what their dad did. And then it now becomes a novel product on the market because it's the only place where someone hasn't talked to this leader about that stuff. And the last thing on that, when you're at events, cocktail parties out in the world, you now become the greatest glue that exists because you'll be in a conversation with one leader and they're like, I always just wanted to have like a massive ant farm. And then you're like, oh my God, you're not going to believe it. The CMO of that company built ant farms when they were a teenager. And you now create these connections between people that no one even knew existed because of the narrative and story of a life. So there's almost 6 levels to everything you create, and you need to contentize those levels. And by the way, when you create levels that are that big and that vast and that wide ranging, the business you need to survive in your life becomes a rounding error of the level of those connections.
And actually that connectivity that you're talking about, it's also a little bit of a game of the old game of concentration. Okay. Remember that game where you put down the cards and you remember where the things are when they get flipped back over and you have to remember that ability to remember where things connect and people connect, where you can be that catalyst between them. Like you were just that example that you just gave. That, I mean, I've been doing that throughout my entire life, and I don't do it intentionally, to be perfectly honest with you. I just do it because I love doing it, because I like to see what the outcome's going to be. And then I'm like, oh my God, yeah, this person really needed what it is that you're doing, or they need that particular thing, or they have something in common. You don't know about how many people that I have met, CEOs and people like that, like you were talking about music. Obviously, the two of us are both musicians. And I find these CEOs who are musicians, and I start talking about music. I have clients of mine who I get together with, not to talk about business. We talk about guitars. We talk about the newest stuff that's on the market. We talk about all this stuff. And it actually, bonds us together on something that has nothing to do with what we're doing for, business. We do the business in like 5 minutes and then spend 2 hours talking about our hobby. Those are the kinds of things that you can start to put people together on. So you're right on point.
Yeah, so I also want to thank everyone who is listening to us or watching us later. And thank you, Adam, for your comments. And I want to say, for everyone who is listening to us, don't hesitate to ask questions, because Matt and Vic here are happy to help you with your struggles, with the challenges that you have. So feel free to reach out and ask anything. It will be also helpful to everybody else who is watching us, because here we're here to share information and valuable insights. Yeah, so the next question that I have for you, Matt, because you've been very insightful, and I feel like we've already got a ton of information that some professors don't give you in universities, for years.
True.
You somewhere early in our conversation, you mentioned that it's very important to reach out to as many people as we want and then create a funnel, right? I think some can get confused in a way that, in my opinion, we should not be sharing everything, like every single piece of our life, because let's say if we have a blog, a more professional blog, how would you suggest to behave? Because sometimes things can be unrelated. Should you tie it to your, should you always tie things and topics to your, professional world and insights, or you believe that you should be posting just everything and reach out to anyone who is interested?
I think that you need to be your own content creator, editor, producer, and fact checker. And you need to have the appearance that you're sharing everything about yourself, but you know where your lines are. And the one thing I've found is, because I do run into this discussion a bunch, I found that there's very little that I wouldn't share with the world. And I think one of the great things you could do when they say, I love my job, I've never worked a day in my life, that kind of thing, right? I think the convergence of personal and professional is it's the magic zone. And if you are, in my opinion, the jobs can be very high paying, very corporate, and they're great. But if you're in a position where you feel muzzled and the money's good, just do it. But for the majority of us who are out there hustling, entrepreneuring, pushing the boundaries of creating great business ideas and all this, I mean, let's be honest. Look at someone like Elon Musk, phenomenal entrepreneur, created things that shocked the system. And I'm reading the Walter Isaacson book right now. I mean, what person who creates an online bank is like, I'm going to do a car company and a space company. It's like, what? But he says everything. Donald Trump, we won't make this political. He says everything on his mind.
Yeah.
And we're not going to the levels they go, and they're in the heads of major things. So my thing would always be lean into transparency. Imagine that you are a product on the marketplace and you're your own PR agent. How do you want to be perceived in the world? And then tell those stories. So for me, everything can connect. So the one thing I want to say above all, I think at this moment in time, LinkedIn is the most important social network that exists, which is great because it's business. So you don't have to think about, I'm going to do this on Facebook. Like, no one's really doing much on Facebook, even though everybody's there when you think of Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. But it's a great point in time where the stars align. Focus on LinkedIn. And, there was I love to look each year at Hootsuite. We all probably know Hootsuite from that platform that allows you to kind of manage all of your social media platforms in one time.
That's where I was introduced to it. Yeah.
So they do great research all the time, great statistics because of what they're able to surface from their own customers and usage. And let me say it right here. One I saw that was great was 60% of social content aims to entertain, educate, to inform without direct promotion for nearly half organizations. So this is on LinkedIn, and this is from professional corporations. Mm-hmm. They're sharing things they're being more experimental. And you know why? Because it's like what I go back to with creating the most amazing white paper in the world for 10 customers. You spent so much time on that. And what if it falls in the forest? And what if you could have just owned the top of funnel end on that in addition, and then hook that to it? So I think be very strategic, but be open. It's a new world. It's like coming out of the pandemic. We've seen each other's homes all the time. Like I think don't be afraid, because if you're afraid, I would say, what do you have to hide? And if it's something you have to hide, that's okay to hide it. But figure out where your line is and tell it. For me, I found this thing on LinkedIn that really works, again, is to take pictures at big events, to curate the pictures. I like to do albums. So if I'm at a huge event, like I was at Sitecore Symposium in Nashville, everybody's there. The leaders of all these companies, the leaders of Sitecore. I go around the events as much as I'm a producer, as I'm having fun, as much as I'm trying to create business opportunities. I go, oh, here's Jake, here's Suresh. Let's do a photo with them. Oh, here's this person. These will be cool to put them together. And I try to put people together who don't make sense, because the combination creates innovation. And then what I do is at the end of the night, I take all the pictures, put them into one post, tag everybody, everybody's company. People will share things about competitors if they're in it. And then it creates this weird cycle. So be your own producer. And I found this works. And so I keep doing it. I found when I talk about my college experience, and I do have great pictures with the tassel stuff and all that, I'll share that once. I'll find a way to share something about the college experience, not to give away the secret here, and to tag Rutgers and to tag the people I was with at that point in life.
Sure.
I'm
a Rutgers alum, so hey, we're down with that.
And so figure what shares. Then I said, you know what? A big part of my life in the last 6 months has found myself taking over all these 4th and 5th grade sports teams. And you start to see the same lessons of leadership that we carry over into our business lives. And you know what? Pictures of kids in uniforms with coaches and stories that connect to it do really well. And so I do that too. And you test it, you put it out there. And here's my idea. Here's the last thing I'll say on that about oversharing. Just overshare. We overthink how much people actually care about what we're putting out there. And we stop ourselves because of that. When in reality, yes, they care about us. The only people who truly care about us are our family. And then we have friends who care about us 50% probably, but like really care about us, but you can only care so, you can only do so much. And I'm like, you know what? Overshare as long as it's not, what's the word, scatological or gross or something that just doesn't make sense. You wouldn't want to do in public anyway. But overshare, because if it works, it worked. The market liked it. If it doesn't work, no one saw it. The algorithm took care of that. And then the two people who come in, they're like, that didn't work. You're already in their head.
See that I was going to ask you that question, something along the lines, and you kind of, the other piece of it too, is that sometimes, as you're creating these different pieces of content, some of them are, done well, because they're thought out, or, that you might have a cohesive idea, and you kind of focused on what it is you want to convey and whatever it is. And some of it may look like crap. Okay. Some of it's spontaneous and it's not, not high quality or whatever. How do you feel about that piece of it? Because I'm in your school. I believe you put it out there, you see what happens. Who cares? As long as, like you say, that it's not something that's, not something that you wouldn't want somebody to know about anyway, or where because then you can find out if you are, where it spreads out your ability to find out what people will consume, want to consume, and will engage with. I want to know what your feeling is about that, because I know high quality stuff is important, because obviously that's the business I'm in. I'm a publisher and all the rest of it, but also just spontaneous, whatever it is, whatever it looks like, it's not shot right or whatever. What are your feelings about that?
I think there is no excuse anymore to have low quality content. Mm-hmm. There are too many tools for such little money now. When you think of Canva, when you think of generative AI, when there has never been a greater time to be a one man, one woman show, one person agency for like $30 a month. So,
right.
And on top of it, I have the four, I think this is the 15 Pro Max. Mm-hmm. Like, I think they said about at the time the iPhone 8, It had more computing power than the spaceship that took man to the moon for the first time.
Right.
This thing, there is no excuse. This thing has one of the greatest cameras on the back ever used. And we talked about this, Vic.
Yeah.
You then have a watch, which allows you to use this camera, set it up on a cheap tripod you can get for $15 from Amazon. Set it up, use this camera on the back, use this to set yourself and to press record, put it in 4K. It's 60 minutes. If you get some basic lighting or set yourself up, use where you are when you travel a lot. We talked about this before, maybe off camera. We are accorded the opportunity to be in really cool places all the time. So, maybe sneak away and do a little photo shoot of Vic, right? Or of Diane. Like, take your tripod. If there's I know you like, for instance, the Park Avenue Club, right? And we'll give them a little shout here.
Sure.
Think about all of the settings they have there. And think of, they're not going to begrudge you if you go into one of those circular conference rooms and pretend to be working on a laptop and take pictures of that. Create B-roll from all these places you're at so you can deploy that B-roll. You always have quality at your fingertips. Use this thing. This is a radio device, a video camera, a word processor, a social disseminator. We've never had so much power in our lives to create high quality content with a lower barrier of entry. So use generative AI and be the overseer of it.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Don't use what it outputs. Use it to your end. And where I find it to be really interesting is when you have an idea for content, but you don't have the time to really see it through. And one of the funniest anecdotes, because I've played with this too. I've almost experimented with it. There was about a year ago in the back of my house. We all run into this at certain points of our home ownership. There's a bird flying into the window for 24 straight hours. They get caught with the glare. They do this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my God, I'm buying these strips from Amazon to look like fake birds. It's still flying into the window. And I said, what would be funny? Let me create a business post about the bird flying into the window and how it's like all of us endeavoring to create great business and ideas. And we keep going into the same thing. And sometimes we just need a misdirection of a glare to find our way through. I fed all of those thoughts to a generative AI and it created a beautiful post. And then added some things that I hadn't thought about. I went, oh, great. Posted that with the picture of the bird flowing into the window. The amount of people who commented on that, big people, like founders of companies. And so use it to, there's this, I don't know what you guys use, but I use Evernote. And then I've heard of this app that's been called Brain Toss. And it's essentially what Brain Toss does is you go into it, you say a little something, and then it emails you that something to your account you want. So you never want to lose ideas. Think about how many thoughts we have in a day. So it doesn't mean post all those thoughts, but record them.
But capture them. Yeah. I'm actually using the recorder on my phone, but you're right.
Yeah. And I use Evernote, or you could use your Apple Notes or whatever. Yeah. But I like Evernote because I'll create these. There was this NPR podcaster who had this really interesting life hack, which was every night before you go to bed. I mean, it's like a diary, but it doesn't have to be as I don't know, from the 1800s England or something. But just write a couple of the top line things from that day before you go to bed. So he did it in an actual book, and then I took it to Evernote. So I started by creating a note for every day, and then it got overwhelming. So I created a note for every month. But what I do is anytime I have a thought, I put it can be a tweet length, it could be a paragraph. I just put it in there. Mm-hmm. And one of the neat thing that happens when you do that, and this becomes really good for creating content, especially podcasting when I don't have a lot of time to prepare, I can go in there and be like, well, that thing I thought in week 3 really aligns with something from week 1 and closes the circle, and created an innovation by combining them. Or I totally forgot that thing I thought in week 1. Yes, I got great content.
You forget some of your brilliance, right?
So do that. and then curate and then use AI. But the neat thing with that too is with something like an Evernote, it's searchable. So you can search through all of your, and this was one of the things that really helped my podcast take off, my personal one, was like you release a podcast, maybe it's 45 minutes or an hour. Think about how many distinct things just in this we spoke about that are taggable. But if it goes out, those things don't get tagged. So what I did was I used an Evernote for every episode, and then I would timestamp every time you talked about something. And then I would create, at the time when Twitter was really more powerful, speaking of Elon Musk, but I would create little tweets for all 30 things that were talked about in that 45-minute to an hour episode. And then I would use Hootsuite, bringing that back around. And I would have it just time release all of those little tweets. And over a week, it would add hundreds of new downloads to my podcast because, one piece of media like this is just a huge book and there's nothing breaking through to it. There's nothing that's telling you, hey, this is the chapter we did this we talked about this, we're rambling. And so now we have powerful tools. Another one, Otter.ai, we've probably heard of. You can take this video, feed it to Otter AI, and in 10 minutes, I mean, this might actually have captions anyway in transcript, but it'll feed the whole transcript. It'll tell you the whole transcript of the episode, almost to 99% accuracy. And then it'll tell you the top line things. It'll do all that. So I started doing that and then creating the tweets from that. So I didn't even have to listen.
And then you're talking about breaking out these bite-sized pieces, right?
And that's where it takes off. And that's the Gary Vee lesson I talk about in Earnfluencing, the content pyramid. You have one big piece of content. And then what do they say with an elephant? How do you eat an elephant? Yep. One bite at a time. It's the opposite. These big pieces of content are our Super Bowl, at least to us, but they are our elephant. No one's eaten this whole elephant. It's our job to make each of it bite-sized because you never know, just like a company, you never know the idea that's in this that takes off and then brings the long tail of this whole episode with it.
I love that.
Yeah, these are amazing tools. I'm not very good at technology, so I usually do everything manual. And when I hear something, I'm like, oh, this is great. I have to use it. So we will have our updates in our content managing.
We're going to use it on this one, Matt.
Break it apart. Yeah, no. Oh, and actually, one other tool that I absolutely love. So we've probably all heard of the tool CapCut, right? That's made by the same. That's made by ByteDance. It's a which owns TikTok for now, at least in America. And that's a good tool. It can take a whole episode of something and then chop it up into parts, and then you can. So it does the repurpose for you of the video, right? But there's one I like even better called CapWing with a K, CapWing. What it does is it can take an hour YouTube video, chop it up into whatever amount of time you want, 30 to 60, 60 to a half minute, up to 90 seconds. You just tell it. I like to go about 45 to 60 seconds. It will chop up from that maybe 10 to 20 pieces from that one piece of content. It will chop from within the piece of content to edit out filler stuff, to make it even tighter, puts beautiful captions on it, and then tells you this will be a 10 out of 10 on how well this will do for these reasons. And boom. Like that's where I say use AI. Don't use AI to do your whole job. Use AI to do the parts of the job you just don't have time to do that keep you from getting to market.
So basically what you're saying is, utilize AI as a tool. It's like, you've got a plate of food in front of you. You can use your fork or you can use your hands, but you might want to use the fork. Okay. Use the tool that has been provided.
That's right. Or drink a shake.
Yeah. Right.
Right. I think, but we have so much. How do we, and that's the Gary Vaynerchuk thing. Now he takes it to another extent where he has like a film crew with him all the time, which is Earnfluencing at its highest level.
Well, I remember the first time I actually spent some quality time with him was when he was going to be on the cover of one of my magazines, and I went to his office. And it actually took me back a little bit because when I went in, I met with him and we started talking about the magazine and the shoot for the cover. And he said, okay, Vic, just walk with me. And we walked all around his office and met with people and stuff, but there were people following him around everywhere. I felt like I said, what are we making here? A movie? I mean, there were people filming them and, and everything.
Well,
filmed everything.
And the thing I love with that,
Yeah.
and we can't all do that, but this phone allows us to, kind of do this, right? Like we can pick a point of the day where I did this the other week, and I'll say it real quick, but the thing that Vaynerchuk is doing is essentially what the idea of the Evernote, the diary is. It's just you're actually capturing it. And I bet you 1% of the things that happen that day actually make it, but 1% of 365 days a year, that's what is that, 30 days of content? Or even if it's 3 days of content, I don't know the math I'd have to look at, but I think it's 3, but that's 4 days of content, even if you're only taking 1% of your day.
Right.
So I tried this a couple weeks ago, and this is a little stack we all can do. And this actually is probably a good way to cap all of this, Diana, to talk about what we share, what we don't. So I have pest control. I had a flying squirrel issue in my house several years ago, and the pest control company who figured it out got my business. And so I have the maintenance agreement with them to come every couple months, and I'm okay with the price, and I'm a customer. But now in these times of need where people need to, everyone's like at this point, why aren't we upselling? Why aren't we doing this? Well, my trusty pest control guy, Bill, texts me and goes, I don't know, Aaron's with me. I'm like, who the heck's Aaron? Aaron's the sales guy. So Aaron has come to look around my house to see if there's anything else we could do. I was honestly a little offended by this. And I told Bill, I got a call to get on. I'm not going to meet with Aaron. And I didn't like it. And then it got me thinking about how we do business as an agency. And we do the same thing when we get a little bit barren with the pipeline. We go, you know what? Bill, as the day-to-day guy, isn't driving more revenue. But Bill is sitting there going, I do my job. I take care of things. There's not more to do. And so in my head, I connected it to this similar idea. So I told ChatGPT, create a script around these 10 bullets about my thoughts on this. It created a great script. I set up my phone in the other room. I put it up so you can read from a transcript, which is another good app to get. I read through the script, tried to be as natural as possible. With my phone, 4K, fed that to Capwing. It took the 8-minute clip and made a perfect 4-minute clip. I then distributed that video very easily to LinkedIn, and it did really well from nothing. From me being pissed off that my pest control company brought in, but it tells a larger story and a narrative, and it connects at multiple dimensions, and it gets us all thinking, boy, that is how I feel when the account manager shows up on the monthly stand-up.
Exactly. You're right. You're absolutely right.
This has been so great. Unfortunately, we have only a few minutes left, but I feel like we can be listening to you for hours because you have so much information to share, so much knowledge. Are there any few maybe summary that you want to tell people at the end? What would be like the top 3 things you want them to take out of this podcast, video? Like, depends on the platform they watch it.
ABC, always be connecting and creating. So if you can take this lesson, I'm giving you the permission. See what you got. We do a lot of this stuff where we're, outbound. We have people calling for us to try to get business. We have people doing this. And then we leave the greatest asset sitting out there, which is ourselves. Put yourself out there. If you are a leader and a business person, if you were okay with a PR company putting your name into an article, you should be okay with putting yourself out there on social. Use your power that's laying dormant and just create come talk to me if you need some help with how to do that, because I'd be happy to help walk through those steps. But there's nothing worse to me than, as I said in the beginning, leaving a shitload of engagement and awareness on the table each day.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true.
Very powerful thing to take away from this, Matt. And I cannot thank you enough, aside from the fact we've been friends for many, many years, but I can't thank you enough for this, because this is really the purpose of why we do what we do, is to provide quality information and things that people may or may not be thinking about. Sometimes they may think about it, but they haven't put a point on it, and now we're pulling all of this stuff together. We want to have a value proposition for businesses and business owners, and large and small, from these things. So I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, if anyone who is listening and watching to us, if you use any of the tips that Matt suggested today, please tag us, tag Matt, so we know that you're using our information, our knowledge, and we'll be happy to give you feedback. If it's on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, doesn't matter. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure to spend this morning with you. Thank you, Vic, for hosting this event, for providing this space for us to communicate. And we'll see each other next time.
You got it. Thanks again, Matt.
Thank you.